Hi everyone, welcome to the second webinar in our Simple Tools for Print and Packaging series. Today's topic is organizing and communicating digital color on different substrates. Presenting today is Mark Gunlock, a solution architect at X-Rite Pantone. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Technical Marketing Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Just a few quick things to go over before Mark gets started. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel, and we will have some time to answer a few of them at the end. Finally, this webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. This link is usually sent out tomorrow, so please look out for that. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark to kick things off.
Great, thanks, Robert. So let's jump in right now. So, hang on. All right, so first, we want to talk a little bit about, how we're communicating color across the supply chain to start with. There's a lot of different ways traditionally that color was communicated from different operators throughout the supply chain. And sometimes this was a bit ambiguous, sometimes it involved subjective calls, and consequently the color from the beginning where we're specifying the color as we go through to design with it, formulate it, and actually put it in production, we end up with different results at the end. And so we get varying appearance on the shelf, the product looks different. Sometimes there was concerns about even like counterfeit products, forfeitries and such. What the brand wants, though, is consistency across the supply chain. And what this requires is an unambiguous definition of that color being communicated from user to user throughout this workflow. And that's a key part of what we're going to be looking at here. So with Pantone, this many people are very, very familiar with. It's been around for a long time, and it is an unambiguous definition or specification of these colors. Most people are very familiar with the fan decks used to select different colors for projects and for printing. These fan decks are associated with digital standards. It's actually spectral color specification around these colors. In fact, when they print the book, they measure those books and compare them back to those spectral standards. And those spectral standards can be used throughout the workflow to validate and to formulate color to make sure that we're hitting the right colors all the way through. The colors work pretty well in a lot of different printing conditions. I mean, they're initially printed on a bright white stock with an offset press. But they translate pretty well to some other printing conditions, like the example we have here. I've got a bright white cup, and there's a pretty good chance I can hit those colors pretty well on that substrate. However, in packaging, we're printing on a lot of different kinds of substrates, and this may not work out as well on different kinds of materials. The example I have in front of us right now is kind of an extreme case, but it really works well to illustrate this. Those same colors will never reproduce on a brown craft corrugate material like this cup sleeve here. So what do we do? Those colors aren't going to simulate there very well, can't be reproduced very well. So what do? Well, what's commonly done traditionally is we take the original color we're trying to target, as you'll see here on the design intent on the left, and we may send that out to different suppliers. They're going to print the same product in different parts of the country. May even be the same converter organization, but just has different sites, and they work with different ink companies at each site. And consequently, what happens is the operators there are going to do the best job they can with the tools they have and get the closest match they can achieve of that. And here we may have, say, 5 different equally distant colors from that original intent, but they're in different directions. They're a little duller, maybe a little darker, maybe a little lighter, but they move in different directions, and consequently, if these ever show up together on the store shelf or at the coffee shop here, they're going to look like a pretty wide range of variation. And that's not what the brand owners are going to want. They're going to want consistency across that. So how do we achieve that? We create what we call a dependent standard. So this is where PantoneLIVE comes in. Instead of having every ink supplier, every print supplier come up with their own best answer, we've worked to develop a set of dependent standards that can be widely used by all those suppliers, where we're going to give them an already good, achievable standard that we're trying to match to that original master standard. Master standard would be what the fan deck had. The dependent is the new achievable target on a type of substrate, in this case, a brown craft, okay? So that when a brand wants their product printed on brown craft, they specify the appropriate color, and every supplier can go and find an achievable target. Their ink guides can get within about 1 delta E of that, so they have much tighter consistency across their production. So instead of providing the ink companies with something that's unachievable and have them just do the best they can and create a whole new standard, we're going to give them an achievable standard that's already linked to that master standard. Now, if you want to put that into production and you're, say, working with the specification level early in that supply chain that I had up there earlier, you want to be able to take a look at how these colors work. There are tools to help out. So the PantoneLIVE Visualizer is a tool that I can go into my master standard library. You'll see that on the left side of this application window. And here I've selected my 485. It's my favorite red that I want to use in my product here. And I've dropped that in my palette. Now, I can put a lot of different colors in that palette, but I'll just start with the red there. And then when I select that, I can then map it out to a number of different kinds of dependent libraries that I might be using for different pieces of my product. Perhaps I've got a folding carton that my product sits in, that my customer's going to take home with them when they purchase it, but that sits inside of a shipping container, and that shipping container may be just used for shipping, in which case no one will see it on the store floor, or maybe it's a very important piece where that shipping container actually becomes part of the display. Maybe it becomes part of the point purchase display. So that would determine how important that color is when it reproduces on there. So in this example, you can see here down below in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see I've got a Carton Flexo UV recycled board. That's a folding carton kind of board. And I see a preview of the color, what it's going to look like on the left side of that, right? And on the right side where it says 0.1, that's a representation of the book or the master standard. So it's telling me right there that's a really close match. You can see you can't really even see a difference between the patch on the right and the patch on the left there. If I go down one and I look at the craft, the brown craft below that, on the right side where it says 9.6, the color there represents the master or the book color. And then that kind of brownish red to the left there, that represents the equivalent or the matched version of that on brown craft. I can't get that bright red on that substrate. That is the linked standard to it. Now, maybe if I'm doing this as just a shipper, that representation would be adequate. But if I want to use this as a point of purchase display as well, maybe I'm going to have the stores tear or cut away parts of the box and use this as part of the display. Maybe I want a better match. So down below that, I see a white craft version of that, and it's only half the distance away, whereas the brown craft is almost 10 delta E. The white craft is just about 5 delta E. It's actually a better representation. So I can make decisions on what my final product may be printed on by viewing these colors on those different types of materials and printing conditions. We've got libraries for offset, flexo, gravure, different types of inks, many different kinds of materials that we print on that might go into your packaging. And you can compare how the colors would reproduce on those different materials and make intelligent decisions on the type of material you're going to print on before you even start building and specifying the product or the packaging. So this tool is very useful for that. Once you've decided on what colors you're going to use, what you're going to specify, then you need to be able to use those in your pre-press and design applications. So there are PantoneLIVE tools, plugins for Adobe Illustrator and your ESCO tools, where you can bring in your designs that were probably built with Pantone master colors initially, and you can convert those over from the Pantone 285C to the equivalent on the, say, the offset virgin carton board type library, okay? So you can do the conversion directly to the type of library you require there. In fact, these tools also are very helpful if you've got custom colors that you've created. If you want to just map those over to a Pantone dependent standard, the closest one on that particular material, so you can get to a standard library definition. This tool will manage that for you. Once you've got the your layouts of your packaging all updated to the color standards you want to shoot for, those can then be communicated to the ink team, and the ink techs can then formulate to match those colors. Now, they're going to start out with the same Pantone dependent standards that you were just placing into your, say, Illustrator or ESCO document, and they can pull those into X-Rite ink formulation software. And what that'll do is allow them to match the spectral values of that color while taking into account their specific pigments that ink company is using. Each company's ink pigments are a little different. And it'll even take into account the substrate that your separator or your converter is using. So it'll take into account the actual inks and materials that are being used to print on that press and calculate the exact formula they need for that condition, okay? Then, when it hits press, the press operators, when they're trying to do their quality control and maintain good color on the press, they too will load those exact same spectral targets into their system, and they will use the tools in the software to guide them to get the best match possible. In fact, ColorShirt has, and many of our tools have this feature called Best Match, and this actually provides further tweaking, further guidance for the operator to understand how to adjust, say, the ink strength or the ink density to get the very best match on the substrate that they're running at that time and with that ink that they have loaded at that time. So, because we know there's variables within the process, each step along here is going to compensate for the consumables that we have at hand at that moment. So with this process control like ColorShirt, the operators will use the tools like Best Match to adjust to match that dependent standard as close as possible, and they'll record those values and be able to report quality output. In fact, many brand owners, many of the larger brand owners are now tracking this in what they call scorecards. And they can actually go back and view that specific color in that specific print condition across all their suppliers, for example. Or I also have some converters that are doing this across all their different sites, so they can see how all their different locations are reproducing that color over time. So there's a lot of good information you can get by standardizing on that specific color, and you'll be able to see how achievable it is and how well you're doing. In this example here, I can see that over a few months, this particular color is running between 2 and 4 delta E. Typically, we're doing well, but we've had a couple bumps here where it's a little bit out of tolerance. So this gives the ability to go back and trend the colors over time. So we can specify the color that's achievable. We can put it into our designs. The ink companies have a better chance of formulating to an achievable match on that. The press operators are also going to target that same color, and then we can track it over time to see that everybody has been reproducing within tolerance of that exact same color. So we avoid that variation in the output. We can tighten that so when products hit the store shelves, they're all going to look much more alike. So that's all the content that I have at this time. Are there any questions or thoughts, Robert?